Okay, hello everyone. On behalf of the Society of American Archivists International Archival Affairs Section Leadership, welcome to another installment of our Archival Landscapes seminars. I'm Karen Trivett. I'm the IAAS Senior Co-Chair and a Steering Committee member. The Archival Landscapes virtual seminar series actually began in 2020. In each seminar, an international guest speaker introduces audiences to the issues and advancements in their local context while describing the history, operating environment, and unique aspects of archival practice in their country. Just a few housekeeping points, if you'll indulge me. Please mute your microphones if you haven't already and close video transmission to free up bandwidth. Feel free to write any questions in the chat box, and we will address as many of your questions as possible if time allows at the end of the session. And I am thrilled to say that our esteemed guest with us today is Mr. Garfield Lamb. He's the University Archivist and Head of University Archives and Library Special Collections at the University of Hong Kong. And he will present today, what do we archive in Hong Kong? I'm so excited to hear the answer to that question. So welcome to you, Mr. Lamb. I will pause our program when we have about 15 minutes remaining, and then I'll segue to question and answer and a little bit of discussion. So I'll let you hang on that with bated breath. And for now, Mr. Lamb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karen. I was just talking to Karen earlier on and Jennifer I just want to say how grateful I am actually, and to see everybody here. And because Hong Kong is a very small place, and being an archivist in Hong Kong is a very niche profession, and I do not have a lot of opportunity to share what I feel working as an archivist here, because I just feel that there aren't other people sharing the same things that I've been experiencing here. So this is really nice to have some like-minded people here to share with, and like all of you. And thank you for taking an interest tonight and listen to me talk about things. I'm going to keep it very casual, and this is just things that I have been observing or experiencing working as an archivist in Hong Kong. So now I'm going to share my good old PowerPoint. Here we are. So is it working?
Yes, you just need to go to screen mode or full, like the full slide.
The full screen, yeah.
Yeah.
Hang on. Yep, here we are. So everything is good, right? You see the PowerPoint? Right,
Perfect.
good.
Perfect.
Okay, so when I was asked to do this presentation, and I had to come up like a thematic thing, and why I chose what do we archive in Hong Kong, because this is the exact questions I'm being asked all the time when I told people that I'm an archivist. And I'm not quite sure if you have the same feeling about me asking when I'm being asked, what do you archive? And then I was just like, what do you mean? What do I archive? I'm an archivist, so I do records management. Are you asking me the question like, what am I collecting? So this is the thing that as a trained archivist, I always find it a bit irritating actually when I'm asked that question. So this is the scenario I'm going to tell you. For example, setting the scene. So if you're chatting with someone on Tinder, and someone wants to know, how's you? Fine, thanks, how are you? And then you say, want to chat, what do you do? I'm a manager. This is already getting very irritating, because like, what kind of manager are you working as? Because there's so many things like you can be a manager of. If I'm telling people that I'm an archivist, and then the next question will be, oh, sounds awesome. What do you archive? And then I'll explain, I organize institutional records, I manage records in an institution, like for work. And then the next thing that they would say, oh, it's great. I love art and movies. I love comics. I have an archive of comics and DVDs. So do you see where is it going? If I'm telling people that in Hong Kong in particular, I work in an archives, I'm an archivist, and they will start telling you that, oh, I love art or I love comics, I love to collect stuff. This is how it goes most of the time. So basically, this is the misconception about archives and archivists in Hong Kong. They always think that you're an archivist or you work in an archive, so you must be just collecting things. They never thought about records management. They never thought about archives is actually something different from collecting things. So this is how I set the scene for tonight. Experience working as an archivist in Hong Kong. So here is the agenda. So I'll be doing some introduction, and then I'll tell you something about the current archival landscape in Hong Kong. So there are quite a few different archives in Hong Kong, including academics, corporate, government, and some so-called archives. And I'll talk you through it, why I think they're just so-called archives. And I'll be also touching something about the archives law, freedom of information, copyright ordinance. These are the things that we have been focusing on. And these are the things that I have been working with every day. And then I'll be talking about the archives education, the observation, and then the question and discussion section. So feel free to just, let me know if you've got any questions in between or any things that I'm clear of and clear about. So the brief introduction to Hong Kong. So I'm not quite sure how many of you have been to Hong Kong or how many of you, know anything about Hong Kong. And just some brief background introduction. And this sort of historic introduction would help you understand probably a little bit about why we have the current archival situation or archival landscape in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is a very small city with a very large population. So we have about, as of today, 7.5 million people in Hong Kong. It's a quite large, very populated city, but we do not have a large geographical space. And we started to be under the British rules in 1842 because of the Opium War back in mainland China. And then a handover happened in 1997. We were handed back to the Chinese sovereignty. And but we are still under the influence of British law and legislation as of today. We have a lot of British rules and legislative policies following the UK legislation. We have our own public records office versus the National Archives because we are not a nation per se. That's why we do not have a National Archives in Hong Kong, but we do have a public records office in Hong Kong to preserve our governmental records. And back in the 70s, one of the journalists, the British journalist Richard Hughes, he wrote a book. It's called A Borrowed Place on Borrowed Time to describe Hong Kong. Basically, what he meant was Hong Kong was just a borrowed place for the Brits and on borrowed time because because Hong Kong was was under the British rule for a very limited time. That's why he used the phrase "a borrowed place on borrowed time." And I think that mentality shaped a lot of administrative decisions and also a lot of colonial policies on Hong Kong. For example, when we think about this place is not for our permanent rule, why would we put a lot of resource onto it? Or why would we let people know so much stuff? Because of that, I think the Brits back then, they didn't want a lot of people to understand or to know about the policies, the British policies, the colonial policies about Hong Kong. And therefore, there are a lot of information, access to information from their point of view was not important to local people. That's why they did not make an effort to have the access to information in place or to have the archive set up for Hong Kong people back then. If you're going to the National Archives in the UK, or if you're accessing a lot of colonial records at the Public Records Office in Hong Kong, you could find a lot of actually files. They were sort of still under the UK Secrecy Act, which means that a lot of files they have sort of different categories. For example, general files, classified, confidential, secret, top secret. Even they just put British eyes only on top of the file's cover. So these are the influence of the UK Secrecy Act back in the UK, and they were all implemented in the colonial places, not only Hong Kong actually, also in Africa, also in other places. If you're going to look at all these colonial files, you will find all these things on the cover. And at last but not least, because Hong Kong was always a borrowed time and borrowed place under borrowed time, we were sort of educated to talk about economy only, but not politics. This is another reason that we do not actually think about why archives are important, why records management is important for our own daily lives. Like unlike other places, for example, places continuously need to people need to be protected by, evidence, or they need to seek justice, like now the Palestinian or in other places, always affected by wars or anything. So Hong Kong is always a very interesting place in that sense. We do not focus on anything about justice, but only economy. So the current Hong Kong's archival landscapes, the misconceptions. So these are the things that I always find it quite intriguing intriguing for my daily work. For example, archiving is just archiving things, meaning collecting things. They do not think about archives is actually relating to records management, but we are just collecting everything. And archives is only about collecting specific objects, artworks. It happens to me quite a lot of times when I talk to the people working in museums. When I talk about, oh, I'm an archivist, and then they always ask me the first question is, oh, what sort of art do you collect? What sort of interesting objects do you have? And I said, well, yeah, we have quite a lot of different things through records management. So I'm only interested in art, so I love artwork. So this is just I just found the conversation is going nowhere if I'm talking to sometimes talking to people like that, they're just only focusing on some certain things instead of like records management. And the third thing is archives is about public relation, communication, not about managing records or accountability. This is one thing that I'll be talking about a bit more, because in Hong Kong, many of the archives are only using things for their PR, public relations, and using it as a in the stage you call it using it for the front, like a facade. But not actually managing any reputation or accountability. Well, I would say PR is sort of like a reputational management, but it's not the only thing that archives are doing. But in Hong Kong, this is a bit weird. They're only using archives as a PR tool. And archives are museums about collecting artifacts. This is some misconception about Hong Kong archives. Actually, people always think that you're just like museums because you're collecting a lot of artifacts. I think this is a thing that we as archivists in Hong Kong should take the blame, because we only mostly showing people something interesting to attract people to come to archives, because that's the thing that we need to sort of change, I think, in the future. And archives have only very old things. This is the general people would think that all the time. We do in the university. We actually do records management, the full cycle records management. We do collect a lot of current records from our departments, but not the other archives as I know of. And the next thing is archives are libraries and should be open for browsing. This is some kind of current students perception about archives, because they always say that, oh, I can't find anything, why don't I just come to the archives and well, can I just go in and browse? I said no, because we are not actually libraries. We are in the library, I mean physically, but we are actually not a library, sort of like a setting, not libraries. And archivists are librarians. People always say that I'm a librarian. I say I'm not. I'm an archivist. So it's different. I don't know why people keep saying that. Maybe they don't understand, but they don't know how to pronounce the word archivist. I don't know. And the next thing would be archives are collection. This is always the thing that I tell people when I'm teaching. I said archives are collections, but not all collections are necessarily archives. Because people always think that, oh, special collections are archives because they have everything. And I said, no, they're not. They're collecting archives. Doesn't mean that they are archives. They're collecting archival materials or manuscripts, but they're not archives because they don't manage their own records. So this is the difference. So now I'm going to show you something interesting, something more colorful. And this is our university archives, for example. This is the academic archives in Hong Kong. And I put the asterisks here on top because we are the only university in Hong Kong. We have 8 universities in Hong Kong, and we are the only one who does records management, meaning that we actually advise different departments from the creation of records until the end of it. So we basically help them with the record creation and then with the retention schedule, and then also help them through the record cycle until they're being appraised again and get things into the archives. So the picture here is our records center. It's an off-site record center. You could actually see my screen. I'm moving the cursor, right? Yeah. So this photo is our record center, and this is our newly renovated university archives in the main library for research purpose. So we have 2 different places. And these are some of the colorful materials that we found and we kept in the archives. For example, this is our original architectural plan. This is the fundraising poster used in 1912 when we opened the University Bazaar. And this is the 1933 University souvenir book. So these are the examples that how we try to attract people to use our cover materials. And again, this is actually our own fault to make people think that we only have some sort of like arty thing or artifacts or anything, because we only show the interesting things to people, but not the actual records. So the next one is the university archives at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I visited their university history gallery a couple of weeks ago. So these are the photographs I took in their gallery. And unfortunately, they actually do not do their own records management. So they only collect things from different departments, things that they think are worthy of being showcased in the history gallery. One thing, the good thing is they do actually have quite a lot of interesting things, like actual objects to attract people. These are all replicas, by the way. They're not original. These are all replicas. But on the other hand, the bad thing is, I think we always talk about archives. It's about content, context, and format. I think if they're cherry picking things to showcase in the gallery or in the university archives, they might lose some of the context of their own history because they do not have a full pictures of everything. But this is actually quite a debatable thing because not all archives have the space or have the resource to manage everything. So, but this is just my own thought as an archivist. I think this is good or this is bad, but this is a good thing that they have a history gallery, which we are trying to do later in the year. And there's another other kind of archives that I was talking about, PR. So this is the corporate archives of the HSBC Bank in Hong Kong. They have a Asia Pacific regional archives. HSBC Bank is also the only corporate company that I know of in Hong Kong. They do their own records management. and they manage quite well. So, for example, this is the oldest currency from China that they have in their archives. They collected it because they are a bank, so they were doing a lot of tradings back in the time in China, back in the 1800s. So this is the oldest paper currency that they have, and this is their gallery, history gallery. So what they do with the gallery is they cater for internal use most of the time, for inviting investors to come in to have some private tour because they want them to invest in the bank, basically. So this is the very good example of doing a PR thing in their own space, using archives as an attraction. So this is the repository. So they do a lot of behind the scene tour here, and they have huge amount of artwork of George Chinnery as well. So basically, the HSBC Bank is the bands of the archives in Hong Kong because they have a lot of financial resource to set up such a beautiful space for public relation and communication use. Yeah. So, but again, this is different purpose because we are academic archives at the university. That's why we support research, and they are more support their own corporate development using archives. So this is also another one, is corporate archives. Swire Archives. Swire is another British shipping company in Hong Kong, and their oldest archives was moved back to UK before World War II already. So they have a big collections at SOAS at University of London. This is the Hong Kong archives. They are mostly they are custodian. They don't do records management, but they're custodian of two largest records collections. One is Cathay Pacific, an airline. One is the Coca-Cola in Hong Kong. So Swire basically has some of their interesting records in their own archives. And again, they use their archives for mostly public relations purpose in Hong Kong. So this is the space here for visitors, and also for internal training, and also for internal investors conferences, something like that. So for government archives, we have as I said, we have the Public Records Office serve as our national archives. So if people they want to understand more about the history of Hong Kong, they will go to the Public Records Office. This is the thing that I will be talking about later, about access to information, because the Public Records Office is the major entry point when we talk about the public's the access to information legislation in Hong Kong. I'll come back to that later. And the next one is the Public Archives, is the Legislative Council Archives. This is the another government-related archives which does their own records management program within the organization, and also they have their own access policy. They are not bound by the Access to Information Act in Hong Kong, but they have their own access policy set up as the legislative body in Hong Kong. By the way, if you're interested in their homepage, I've got the homepage here, so you could click on the links. I'll send the PowerPoint to Karen later, and you could actually look at the PowerPoint and use the information. So M+ Museum, I'm not quite sure, have you ever heard about it? This is the largest museum in Southeast Asia at the moment. They have a lot of interesting art collections, contemporary art collections, and they've recently set up their own institutional archive inside their own museum. This is interesting because when they first set up their archives, they refer their archives as collection archives, meaning that there are collections, basically. They use the word archives for their collections. It's interesting, but I was asking them a question. I remember when I met their curator, I said, but do you actually keep your own records? This is the archives. And they said, we don't know yet. Until now, they have their own institutional archives, meaning that they start collecting their own history of their own museum, which is a great thing, I think. So this is sort of, finally there are some curators understand what archives are in Hong Kong. This is an interesting one. I call it other so-called archives, Asia Art Archives, because when I was looking at the description, they would say archives under Asian Art Archives research collections comprise materials gathered from focused research projects undertaken by AAA in partnership with artists. But I do not see anything like that. But what I see was the collections that they collected from somewhere else. So basically, they are like special collections. They're collecting different art projects from somewhere else, but they put them together. They call it an archive. This is a bit confusing to me because I don't see them doing their own records management about their own institution. So yeah, so I just want to have maybe we could have a discussion about this, but I just found it a bit confusing. So another thing I want to draw your attention is the archives law in Hong Kong. We do not have an archives law in Hong Kong per se. Um, the importance of archives law is to make sure records are created, records are being used properly, records are being protected, and records are being lawfully disposed of. So this is why archives law is important. But we do not have archives law in Hong Kong. So for example, for most of the government departments, they do not necessarily um, they do not have to create basically records for public accountability. If they're not creating records, how would we, keep them accountable in that sense? Yeah. So that's why we always there are a group of people they call Archives Action Group. Um, they urged the government to create an archives law. And then in 2018, the Archives Law Subcommittee was formed. And then they published a consultation paper asking the public about the importance of having an archives law in Hong Kong. But until now, we still haven't heard anything. And this is the very last news that we could find, or I could find, in Hong Kong about the archives law. So they always say that things are still being discussed at the Legislative Council, but actually it is in a very low priority. So I don't see that will be happening very soon. So this is one of the things that I want to share with you. This is the current one of the archival landscapes in Hong Kong. This is the thing. And on the other hand, it's funny enough, there is actually archives law in China back in 1987 already. Um, if you're interested, you could actually follow this link to read through the whole archives law in Hong Kong. But the emphasis here is that this law is enacted in order to enhance archives administration, regulate the collection and arrangement of archives, effectively preserve and use archives, enhance information of the archives, and promote modernization of the national system and capacity of government in the service of the cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics. So basically, the archives in China is set up for protecting the government and also protecting the party. You could read the whole thing about the archives law in Hong Kong. So the differences here is we try to make sure that the archives law in Hong Kong is enacted to protect the records being created and being used and being disposed of. But in China, they keep everything for the sake of keeping everything to protect the administration and also the party per se. But they are not mentioning anything about, well, at least I don't see anything about, access to the archives later on in the access to information legislation on China. So So in Hong Kong, there are two ways of access to all these records. If the records are in the Public Records Office, we could apply for access directly through the PRO, the Public Records Office. But if the records are still being held by the government departments, we could apply for access through this code on access to information. Okay, but you see the description here currently, there's no legislation for access to information held by the government. We do not have such law in Hong Kong. So how could we access to all this information? It all depends on this code on access to information. But the access to information has a lot of flaws in Hong Kong nowadays because it only applies to these 82 government departments. So some of the departments, they're out of the question. For example, the auxiliary police force. That's why there are a lot of actually records are not accessible. They're inaccessible by the public because they're not under the code. So this is actually quite an interesting case because we heard a lot of complaints about people they couldn't find any records through the governments because they said there are 16 exemptions according to this code that they could deny access, then they could refuse disclosure of all the records. To be fair, some of the reasons are quite internationally known. For example, defense and security, I mean, that's fair. And legal restrictions, of course, you can't disclose anything during the legal process. But some of the exemptions are quite large in terms of scope. For example, research, statistics, and analysis. Anything relating to statistics or research or analysis in progress of being researched on, they are not supposed to be open for public use. So some of the departments, they're actually quite vague about not providing any information because they are just using all these very vague sort of reasons to refuse people to access to information. So this is the problem about the code because the code itself is actually not legally bound. And when people are denied access to the information, the only thing that they could complain to is just going to the ombudsman in Hong Kong and tell them that I'm denied to access to those files, but is there any other way they could do it? And then the ombudsman always say no because the code, they always said that the code of information is already set. It's already saying that you can't access to those information. Unlike overseas, for example, Australia, New Zealand, or the UK, the archivists actually held the restrictions, or they have certain power about opening some records or lifting the embargo period. But actually, the ombudsman has no legal power of doing so in Hong Kong. So this is another dilemma about access to information and archives law in Hong Kong. So we were talking something about access to information on mainland China. So this is the only thing that I could find on the Hong Kong homepage. The only access to information on mainland is their own personal information. And then they call it personal information protection law. So basically, if you want to access to any information, yeah, that's fine. You could access your own information, your own file, or your own personal particulars through the government agency. It may not be fair for me to say it. I do hear about people access to municipal archives back in China. For example, some of our professors, that when they do research on mainland China, they could apply for access to the archives, of the town, city, or municipal levels, and they have certain files that they let people to use. But on the other hand, this is quite a daunting procedure. For example, our professors need to ask some of their friends from mainland university, write them some invitation letters and said that you are invited to do certain research on some certain topics. So that's why I give you this letter. So you use the letter to approach the archivists at the municipal archives, and then the municipal archives will ask you why you want to access those records and what do you want to look at, and then going through a lot of hoops, and then they will let them look at some certain records for certain research purpose. So it really depends on the archivist in the town archives or city archives or municipal archives and how they approach the research topic, so on and forth. This is quite a daunting procedure, as I've heard. I've never done it myself, but this is what I'm told by some professors in university. Another thing about Hong Kong is the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. So this is the major thing that we work with in our university archives every day, because we have a lot of records from the registry about student records. So if people want to do, for example, family research, or they need to access their own personal files, then this is the major thing that we need to look at every single day, or even university minutes to see if there aren't any personal data to be kept together with the minutes, for example, job applications, because we have a lot of, for example, dean recruitment or vice president, and their own information is included in a lot of management minutes. So we need to make it quite clear that we do not open those minutes because of the personal data, or we need to do redaction before opening them for public viewing. This is a new copyright ordinance amendment that we received like a few months ago. I'm showing these two because I find it quite interesting. The person who is doing the copyright ordinance here, they clearly do not understand how archives work. If we're looking at B point here, it says before libraries, museums, and archives may make use of donated copies of works, such as films, which are out of print or not commercially available in the market. So their idea of archives is just like library and museum. We're just collecting things from outside with copyright issues. But if for us archivists, if we're managing our internal institutional records, we do not have any copyright issues because we are just using our own records. And we could actually say that we are the copyright owners, so we could use the records. Just the matter of disclosed or not disclosed. On the other hand, if we are acquiring some personal collections from our own people, we always clear our copyright issues. We always say that if you're not giving me the copyright, I'm not going to take your things. It might not be always the case for all the archivists, but this is just the thing that I found it quite interesting happening in Hong Kong, and put it here and asking us to clear the copyright thing, or there is a copyright issue if we're using some of our records. I find it quite interesting. So the archival education, we do not have any proper education in Hong Kong. We do not have any training programs, or we do not have any degree programs on archival studies. And this is the only one that we have in Hong Kong. Basically, is a postgraduate diploma in archival studies. And when I read the highlights here, it says archivist as a relatively nascent profession in Hong Kong. First of all, I said, well, I mean, I don't see the word nascent for a very long time. And why do we think archivist job is a nascent profession? It's very interesting because, archivist is a very, I wouldn't say, common, but it's just like we have those jobs, in Europe or in the US or in Canada for ages. But I don't understand why they say it's a very nascent job in Hong Kong. I think it's worth discussing about this. And this, yeah, I just find it quite fascinating to see the highlights here. So yeah. So basically, because we do not have proper trainings or proper program about archives in Hong Kong, that's why this is a very sort of like a niche thing here. So archives in Hong Kong, my observations are, again, there are only two archives that I could name to do records management that I'm sure that they are doing records management. One is my own university, the other one is the HSBC Bank. From we overlook the whole records cycle from start to finish. We are the only two institutions doing that, but not the others in Hong Kong. And there are only talking about using archives, talking about culture, um, using it as a soft power tool to attract people to do PR. And they have no legal, no visual, no institutional accountabilities per se in their own archives. And they're mostly corporate, used for public engagement, public relations, and communication. I'm not saying it's a bad thing because we always need money. We always need investors to invest into our archives. But on the other hand, I think it's just a bit overkill at the moment because we sort of like shift focus on something else and we sort of forget the original functionality of archives, why we have archives, because of justice, because of the avoiding dispute, because of the accountability, all sorts of things. And they always use the word service as like a heritage repository. And they use the word heritage a lot for archives in Hong Kong because they want to make it a bit more like, I don't know, more attractive, a bit fancier. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe we could have a discussion about it. And and most of the archives in Hong Kong, they're just like special collections. They collect materials gathered from non-institutional sources. So they collect things from outside and then they set is their own archives. But actually not the records or the things themselves are not actually being created or produced by their own institution. And again, the misconception, the archives are wrongly defined as just collecting agencies, collecting everything. And one more thing is that archives are always referred as archives and manuscript as special collections by librarians. So this is the very frustrating thing because when they're referring to archives and manuscripts and these special collections in the libraries, they're talking about the probably personal manuscripts collected from somewhere else, or the personal archives by some people that are important to the university. But they always misunderstood that when we're talking about archives at the university, we do records management, we manage the institutional records instead of just, some certain personal manuscripts. Yeah. So this is the very big misconception about archives in Hong Kong. So here we are.
Here we
Thank you
are.
so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Garfield.
Yeah, good to get everything off my chest now.
I hear
I'm all
you. No,
happy.
happy to absorb what you delivered today. If you'll stop sharing your screen,
Yeah.
then I can look at a gallery view of our audience, and it is the time you've been waiting for, audience members, in terms of asking questions. Um, of course, I tend to have the first question and I put it in the chat, but I'll just iterate it here. What is the landscape of professional organizations or support otherwise in Hong Kong or even in China more broadly?
Um, I think we only have one local um, society. It's called Hong Kong Archive Society.
Mhm.
But they're not run by archivists. So they're I think their members are all people who are interested in archives, but they're not
Mhm.
archivists. Yeah. So I'm not going to comment on that because I think some of their activities are a bit archives unrelated, like not relating to archives at all. They're
Mm.
just a group of people. They like histories basically, yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
but
Mhm.
they do not talk about like archival theories or archival management, things like that. Yeah. The other one is ICASUV. I know that we have quite a few members in Hong Kong, but we do not like gather ourselves. We normally gather through the ICASUV events. Yeah,
Super. Thank you.
yeah. So do you know when the first archivist was working in Hong Kong? I think it's the Public Records Office one. I know Don Bragg. Don Bragg. Have you ever heard of him? Don Bragg used to be our government archivist, so he's Australian, I think. And then my boss, the former university archivist Stacy Belcher Lee, Stacy Gould. So her maiden name is Gould. So she used to be the archivist at the William and Mary back in the States. Yeah. So she
Mhm.
came to Hong Kong in 2006 to set up the archives, university archives. So this is the good thing. Actually, I, I, I loved her a lot because she not only because she hired me as an archivist and she trained me up as well, and she was the only one who brought in the a lot of archival standards in Hong Kong, and she was actually in that archival subcommittee group for setting up archives law as well. So she's been pushing it quite a lot in Hong Kong to say that we need to have certain standards. For example, the basic environmental control, security, and everything. She brought all those things into the university, and then she taught all the other universities to do the same thing, to set up their own archives. And then she was the one who insisted on only hiring certified archivists in Hong Kong to be the archivist because she thinks that this is very important to have a benchmark for all the archivists to follow ethically, professionally, and also theoretically speaking. So yeah, good on her to have all these things in Hong Kong. Yeah. So otherwise, we won't be having any archives standard here in Hong Kong.
Looks like we have a question from Rebecca. Rebecca, you are more than welcome to unmute and open up your camera and present your question.
Oh, good. My camera is working. Hey,
Yes.
Garfield. I don't know if
Hi,
you remember
Rebecca.
me, but I worked at HSBC in the United States for a couple of years. And I think you maybe had
Ah,
started at HSBC in Hong Kong when I was there.
mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so you a lot of the things you said resonated with me, especially about objects. I know
Mm-hmm.
when I do exhibits for alumni, they always want things, and our archives doesn't have a lot of things. So I try
Mm-hmm.
to, like you do, documents that look nice, something they could browse through like a duplicate, but we don't have a lot of that either. So I think it's always a challenge to explain to people that we collect the information about the institution and the history of the institution, which I find really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating because when you read the stuff, you learn a lot about the history and why things are the way they are. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was one of the ones. And then people confusing what we do. That happens a lot
Yeah.
here. And I think
Oh.
it's way more common in Europe and where you are for there to be institutional records management that helps out
Mm-hmm.
archives. Because normally we kind of do it on our own, I think. I don't know if that's been
Mm-hmm.
a experiences, but you're kind of trying to do both jobs. And luckily, if you work at a
Mm-hmm.
state university like I do, there is records management happening and there is a retention schedule you can refer to. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people have no idea what that means or how to read it
Mm-hmm.
or what to do. So you end up doing a lot of that on your own.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Because the good thing is some of the people at the university, they are actually interested. And then they do have the sense of, keeping records and keeping their own history. But on the other hand, they're always only thinking about us when they are running out of space. They do not
Mhm.
follow any retention schedule. And then they always ask me to give them a talk and like how to manage physical records and how to do digitalization and everything like that when they want to. So yeah, it's really difficult, especially in Hong Kong, because people just don't have the sense of it.
or here it's like, why isn't everything digital? Why isn't it all online? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca,
Thanks.
would you mind telling us where you work? You might have
Oh,
said it, but I didn't catch it.
yeah, I'm at the University of Connecticut at the School of
Oh,
Law. So I'm like
super.
a
Mm-hmm.
regional campus of the big university. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you
Mm-hmm.
for coming today and for your question.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to say that is just like as I mentioned that we do not have archives law in Hong Kong, and this is a bit difficult to actually help people understand why it's so important to have an archives law in Hong Kong because people just don't see the need of it or they just never thought about it. And yeah, so I think this is a shame really because if the government um, would raise the awareness, I think our job would be easier. Yeah. to explain to people why keeping records is so important. Yeah.
Is there a law out there that you wish Hong Kong could emulate?
Archives related. I think archives always could be quite enough. I think. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think the access to information definitely have to be improved. Yeah, because for example, if people always have to go to different departments to apply for different access. As I said to you, only like 82 departments fall under that code of things. If records are not being transferred to the PRO, they have to go to different departments to do different applications. I encountered that once when I was doing house research, because I need to go to the lands department. I have to go to the monument like historic and monument thing, and then I have to go to the fishery, and then I have to go to the something like the maps department or something like that. So I have to go to 4 departments to do one research, and then I have to wait for about like 4 months to access to those records. It's like crazy because they're not at the PRO, they're not at the Public Records Office.
How do you get
Yeah.
anything published if you have a wait
No, you
time?
can't. Seriously, no, you can't. So this is the frustrating things. Yeah.
Oh my word.
How many staff work at the University of Hong Kong Archives, including myself? Only 4.
Wow.
But we are doing the whole university-wide records management program and the archives. Yeah.
What kind of faculty numbers and student numbers are at University of Hong Kong?
30,000.
What? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. We have 12 faculties. Yeah.
My goodness. Well, that's
Yeah.
alarming.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Go for it, Jennifer.
Sorry if you mentioned this before and I missed it, but is there any type of certification or like the
In Hong
records
Kong?
management / archives? Yeah. Like in the US, we have the
No.
certified records,
No.
certified archivist, then certified records manager. They're 2 separate like certificates.
No, we don't have things like that in Hong Kong. No.
Oh, okay.
So the postgraduate archival study is the only thing there in Hong Kong. But I don't think it's enough, basically, because I hired people like archives assistant. They all finished that program, but basically that program only gave them a very, very tiny amount of like a surface knowledge about records and archives management. Yeah.
I was surprised to see that curriculum was 12 months and then they come away with such little training.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. I wonder what the
Yeah.
curriculum looks like.
They talk about because the person who taught is from the government before he retired. So he talked about how he managed the records in the government, which is, I think, okay if everybody's working for the government, but not because we have our own records management. So basically, something is not really applicable. And then the other thing is they talk about digitization, which is useful, I think, digital archives.
Sure.
And also how to manage digital records, which is also useful. But on the other hand, in Hong Kong, we are so behind because basically no organization is interested in investing into digital records management program.
Really?
Yeah. So not even the university. Yeah.
I'll leave that with a pregnant pause. We have another question in the chat. Do you have faculty status, Garfield?
No, I don't. No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Another question from Shelley on there too.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer.
So are most manuscript collections managed by librarians or archivists?
Librarians.
Wow.
Yeah. But on the other hand, actually, we do have some manuscript collections donated by our professors. Yeah. So if you're talking about manuscript collections not relating to the university, I put them into these special collections.
Right.
Yeah, so they're managed by librarians. So I do now, because I because it's interesting because my archives used to be under the registry.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot more direct contact with the records management of the university. But now we are put under the library. I don't know why the changes, but it's actually sometimes it's a bit more difficult for us to do things because I have to explain a lot to the librarians. Sorry about librarians, but we do have different things, different sort of like a mindset about managing archives. So I train my staff members quite a bit about how to manage the special collections and how to manage the manuscript collections. Yeah. So I'd rather do my own training. Yeah.
Sorry about that, Garfield. We're closing in on time, and I want to just say we have, let's see, we have 2 questions in the chat, but I do have some closing remarks, as well as Jennifer wants to add a bit of information. Just quickly, Garfield, do you have support to attend conferences in other countries?
Yes, we do. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Great.
Because I'm the only archivist now at the university. That's why. Yeah. So I quite like to. I do attend SAA before COVID, and then I do attend ICAAS International Council on Archives program to give papers. Yeah. So I do these when I'm going overseas, and we use archive space at work. Yeah.
Great.
So this is the program that we use. I used to use CALM as well because CALM is more widely used in the UK and Europe, whereas archive space is more in the States. Yeah.
Right. Well,
and we follow all the international standards as well. For example, the DEX and also the ISAG. We use both. We reference to both. Yeah.
Well, this has just been the most engaging hour. I cannot thank you enough, Garfield. And
no, thank you for having me.
Oh, and the questions, just wonderful, wonderful hour of exchange and collegiality. So thank you everyone for attending. I do have some closing remarks. I just want to say that today's recording will join past seminars, all of which can be viewed on SAA's YouTube channel and its IAAS Archival Landscapes playlist. And the other IAAS program is Archival Vistas Briefings. And Jennifer Donchev, our junior co-chair for the section, will give you a little bit of information and a teaser about what's coming up in that arena.
Thank you, Karen. Our last Archival Vistas seminar for the 2024-2025 season is scheduled for July 10th. That's a Thursday. I'm still working with our participants on getting the exact time, but keep an eye on your emails from SAA because coming up hopefully really soon, I'll let you know exactly when that is happening, and they'll have the registration link. The participants will be discussing their work with the Records in Context, which is an ICA standard for describing records. And we're actually excitingly co-sponsoring again with the International Council of Archives section on University and Research Institution Archives Steering Committee. As Garfield has mentioned, that's the ICA SUV. And so they'll be working with us and helping to spread the word. So just keep an eye on your emails.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Well, keep in touch if you would like to know more about anything. So I'm happy to share. Yep.
Lovely. Just to close, I want to thank you all again for a wonderful hour together. And just want to say we'll see you actually next month, the week of June 15th. Date exact to be determined. Sorry for the dangling carrot there. It'll be the season's final installment of Archival Landscapes, where we will visit South America's Chile and its recently retired Director of National Archives, Emma de Ramon Acevedo. And more details will follow shortly. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day, and for Garfield, the rest of your evening. And I really thank you so much for being here. It's just such a delight, and I can never get enough of this forum.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
thank you.
I'll sleep better tonight. Thank you so much for listening to me.
I'm going to stop recording now.
Thank you.
Let me get to that button.